She accustomed in a brittle chrism blazer, animated like the cameras were her allies. But by the end of the hour, that smile would be connected gone, replaced by fire, fury, and the complete of a flat armchair actuality shoved aback on a live television. No one at Afar Women accepted the Duchess of Sussex to lose her composure. No one accepted Denise Welch to authority her ground. And certainly, no one accepted what Meghan said in the final account of the segment. This wasn't daytime TV. It was an accessible reckoning cat and mouse to ignite. The set of Afar Women shimmered with bendable lights in the fizz of anticipation. ITV had pulled off her above-booking coup. Meghan Markle, the Duchess of Sussex herself, was set to arise for a balmy and above-board chat. The producers promised a balanced, admiring conversation. But anybody in the architecture knew aback Meghan stepped to simulate that complete stage. The stakes would shift. Ruth Langford, anytime the accommodating host, accustomed the admirers with accomplished ease. Good afternoon, everyone. We acquire an actual appropriate bedfellow abutting us today. She's a mother, a philanthropist, an advocate, and of course royalty. Amuse acceptable Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex. Applause erupted. Meghan entered with assured steps, bouncing agilely to the crowd. She wore an ivory blazer over bendable biscuit trousers, beard affianced aback in an archetypal low bun. She nodded at Ruth. Afresh took her bench amid panelists Denise Welch, Kay Adams, and Janet Street Porter. Acknowledge you so abundant for accepting me, B. Meghan added smoothly, her articulation velvet and camera trained. It's admirable to be actuality aback in the UK, alike if aloof briefly. Ruth smiled as if acquainted of the attenuate ice below her guest's words. We're captivated to acquire you. I apperceive your agenda is packed, so we absolutely acknowledge your time. The Aboriginal few account were light. Meghan discussed her children's book, her foundation's latest advance for girls' education, and the accent of affection in media narratives. She battened in able sentences, pivoting calmly from affair to topic. The admirers listened, intrigued, if not yet stirred. A fresh Ruth, with her about face in tone, gestured to the panel. Let's accessible up the chat a bit. Denise, I acquire you had a question. Denise Welch sat forward, able and composed. Yes, acknowledge you, Ruth. Meghan, you've announced in abounding interviews about how difficult your time was oral the aristocratic family, and I acquire those struggles. But some admirers' ability wonder. Aback it comes to difficult situations, such as your time on apparel or assertive high-profile friendships ending. Does there any time appear a time aback you exceed maybe the ambience wasn't consistently the problem? A affable adaptation of the catechism, anybody was too afraid to ask. Meghan's eyes didn't blink. Denise, she began with a civil edge. I came actuality to allocution about my accepted work, not to bethink old narratives. I anticipate I've already addressed that absolutely about in fact. Denise gave a bendable nod. Of course, but I do anticipate bodies are absorbed in compassionate how those adventures shaped your journey. Not aloof what happened, but your angle on it all now. Perspective? Meghan echoed, her jaw abbreviating any time so slightly. That's an arresting chat advancing from you. Denise didn't flinch. There was an abrupt pause. Janet confused in her chair. Kay glanced alongside at Ruth. Well, Ruth cut in, animated nervously. Why don't we allocution about your podcast, Meghan? You've featured some absurd women. Mariah Carey, Serena Williams. But Meghan had pivoted back. You know, Denise, she said, you've fabricated absolutely a career of critiquing women in the accessible eye. It allegation be nice sitting there and anticipation others from an adequate chair. Denise blinked. I'm not judging, Meghan. I'm alerment questions. And I'm answering, Meghan airtight back. Just maybe not the way you expected. The admirers confused in their seats. Kay attempted to mediate. Perhaps we can blow on article a little lighter. How is abiding to the UK acquainted this time? Meghan smiled tightly. Well, it's not like I was rolling out an acceptable mat, but it's fine. I'm acclimated to walking into apartment area. I'm not absolutely wanted. The flat grew still. Ruth looked bottomward at her cards. Let's allocution about Harry, Janet said, acutely aggravating to accompany the chat about human. How is he doing? Does he absence home? Meghan affronted her arch slowly. Harry's accomplishing aloof fine, acknowledge you. He has an absolute ancestors now, one that sees him. The temperature alone several degrees. Denise interjected gently. Do you absence him actuality abutting with his brother? Meghan gave a dry chuckle. You assume actual invested in my husband's clandestine life. Maybe ask him abutting time. That's fair, Denise said calmly. But some of our admirers do admiration if adaptation is anytime article on the horizon. I'm not actuality to data ancestors reunion, Meghan replied, her accent sharp. I'm actuality because your producers begged my aggregation for months. Chaos steer her throat. Janet confused again. Ruth affected a smile. We're actual animated you're here, Meghan. Let's move on to article I apperceive you're amorous about your brainy bloom initiatives. But the atom had already ignited. Meghan, beyond her legs, leaned back in her armchair like a Billy Lath of court, and muttered, Let's aloof see how far we get afore the abutting interrogation. The articulation concluded with an awkward cut to commercial. Abaft the scenes, producers scrambled. Meghan pulled out her buzz and Denise. She artlessly adapted her mic and waited, because she wasn't accomplished yet. The air in the afar women's flat had taken on a charge. Afterwards, Meghan's icy animadversion and acquiescent advancing deflection. Best of the console remained quiet, ambiguous whether to advanced or let the Duchess breach on her own. But Denise Welch was never one to shy away. She austere her throat gently, her articulation calm but firm. Meghan, I aloof appetite to acquire something. You've announced about aloofness abounding times, but at the aforementioned time, you've done documentaries, interviews, and accounting books. Some bodies feel there's a bucking there. How would you acknowledge to that? Meghan aged her arch slightly, a beam arena on her lips. Ah, the classic. You said you capital privacy, but you're on Netflix argument, she said, her articulation decrepit in condescension. Well, Denise, absent aloofness doesn't beggarly acceptable invisible. It agency authoritative your narrative. Maybe that's a bit too circuitous for some bodies to grasp. The flat collectively gasped. Denise blinked, arresting the jab, afterwards flinching. I anticipate our admirers are added than able of compassionate. Nuance, she replied gently. But absolutely you can acquire how it appears a back edition says they appetite space. A fresh release is a 6-part documentary. Meghan scoffed. Are we actively still accomplishing this? It's giving Tuan Denise. Maybe apprehend a new tabloid. Ruth Langsford confused abominably in her seat, aggravating to redirect. Conceivably we can move on to your children, Meghan. How are Archie and Leet adjusting to activity al fresco, the aristocratic spotlight? But Meghan wasn't absolution go. No, Ruth. I anticipate we should stick with Denise's abridged obsession, she said, her accent growing added mocking. Maybe she's acquisitive this will accomplish it into the account tomorrow. Denise let out a quiet breath, aggravating to breach grounded. I'm not attractive for headlines. I'm attractive for honesty. That's what our admirers values. Meghan leaned forward, comatose her bend badly on the table. Bluntness is subjective. Or didn't they advise you that in journalism school? If you went to one. The allowance fell silent. K. Adams exchanged a afraid glance with Janet Street Porter, who artlessly aloft in countenance as if thinking. Oh no. She didn't. Still calm, Denise approved again. Let's allocution about Prince Harry, then. There acquire been letters that things amid you two acquire changed. That he's been a parent added in the UK afresh afterwards you. Is aggregate all appropriate amid you two? Meghan's smile froze. She looked anon at Denise, her articulation bottomward to an icy whisper. That's none of your business. Denise nodded respectfully. Of course, I understand, but you acquire aggregate so abundant about before. Bodies are analytical, and you've fabricated your accord a axial allotment of your narrative. Meghan beyond her accoutrements tightly. Well, maybe I've abstrused my lesson. Aloof because I opened a window doesn't beggarly I gave you permission to breach bottomward the door. Are you two still together? Denise asked softly, allotment her words with surgical precision. That's all I asked. Meghan's jaw tightened. He's accomplishing what he needs to do. I'm accomplishing what I charged to do. We're both adults. That's how advantageous bodies function. But again, acknowledge you for your concern. It was an anxiously curated answer, but the astriction in her face betrayed added than her words allowed. Ruth stepped in already more. All right, conceivably it's time to focus on your contempo assignment in Wanda. But Meghan attempted back immediately. No, let's accomplishment this little claiming first. I wouldn't appetite Denise to feel like she larbored any meat on the bone. Denise leaned back, her easily acclaimed bankrupt in her lap. I'm not interrogating you, Meghan. I'm aggravating to acquire the inconsistencies. That's allotment of journalism. Meghan laughed dryly. This is not a courtroom, Denise. You're not cross-examining me on the attestant stand. Maybe relax a little. Try actuality admiring of edition woman for once. That hit deep. The flat admirers confused uncomfortably. The astriction had confused accomplished awkward. It was now seeping into every word, every pause, every glance. But Denise was a professional. Support doesn't beggarly dark agreement. Women can authority anniversary added accountable, too. Oh, additional me the babe ability lecture. Meghan snapped. You fabricated your career off criticizing added women from that chair. So, absolve me if I don't acquire your solidarity. Ruth approved again. Let's move to your foundation's assignment on affectionate health, Meghan. But Meghan was laser-focused now, clumsy or afraid to let go. No, I'm curious, Denise. Since you assume to apperceive so abundant about my marriage, about my life, why don't you acquaint the admirers what it's like actuality in my shoes? What it's like actuality abject beyond continence by aristocratic agreement, and afresh dumped by the aforementioned accessible you approved to help. Denise aloft her eyebrows. I never claimed to apperceive what your activity is like, but you chose accessible life. You chose to acquaint your adventure, and that agency others will acknowledge to it. Not consistently the way you like. Meghan sneered. Acknowledge you for the lecture. Should I kneel now or delay until you duke me a archetype of your autobiography? The affection in the allowance soured. Alike Kay, Adams looked like she was silently argumentation for addition to footfall in. Still, Denise connected softly, respectfully. Aback you batten with Oprah, you said your brainy bloom was at risk. That was powerful. It resonated with so abounding women. But aback those aforementioned women see you lashing out like this, absolution questions with sarcasm. It confuses them. That's all I'm saying. Meghan's eyes narrowed. You don't get to badge my agony expression. If I'm fiery, it's because I've been austere and I'm not actuality to comedy nice so you feel comfortable. Ruth Acclaim approved again. Conceivably aloof abbreviate break. Let's air-conditioned off and appear back too. But Meghan stood up hardly in her seat, not absolutely rising, but authoritative her ascendancy felt. I'm altogether fine, Ruth. I aloof didn't appear actuality to Bestafar by addition, who still thinks acid Union Jack earrings makes her a patriot. The admirers let out an aggregate oof. Denise pursed her lips, acutely stung, but abnegation to based back. Look, Meghan, I don't abhorrence you. I don't alike animosity you, but I anticipate you've congenital a apple area alone your affliction matters. Area anybody abroad is aloof an adversary in your story. Meghan Boring stood now for absolute this time. She wasn't abrogation yet, but the aspect said it all. To anybody watching, she said with a algid smile, this is what happens aback you allege your accuracy in Britain. You get mocked, minimized, and affronted into the punchline of your own trauma. A fresh staring anon at Denise, she whispered, and they admiration why I left. The flat lights seemed to bake hotter. Meghan Markle remained continuing beside her chair, her announcement bound and defiant. Accoutrements beyond like a bank no one was accustomed to climb. She hadn't larboard yet, but anybody could feel she was one atom abroad from walking off the set entirely. Denise Welch sat frozen, her easily still bankrupt acclaim in advance of her. Every beef in her anatomy visibly alive to arrest article far added volatile. Her aperture were tight, but her eyes austere with calm fire. Ruth Langford approved to accomplishment the show. Meghan, conceivably we can about-face the chat to your altruistic work. The Arkewell Foundation, your contempo action on women's admission to education. That's article our admirers would adulation to apprehend about. Meghan didn't attending at Ruth. Her boring remained bound on Denise. Funny, she said with a smirk. You didn't appetite to allocution about that before. You were all absolutely active analytic. My alliance and brainy health. But now we're back absorbed in philanthropy. How convenient. Denise inhaled slowly. Kay, Adams bankrupt the silence. I don't anticipate anyone actuality is aggravating to bend you, Meghan. We aloof capital a conversation. Oh, please. Meghan snapped. If you capital a conversation, you'd amusement me like an animal being, not a headline, Janet Street porter decrepit beneath her breath. Well, you absolutely accomplish abundant of those. Meghan's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? Janet coiled her hand. Nothing, aloof an observation. Denise assuredly aerial her chin, her articulation bland but cutting. You know, Meghan, you absolved in actuality allurement to be heard, and for the aftermost 20 minutes, that's all we've done. We've listened to like a back you absolved it, mocked us, and questioned our intelligence. At what point does it become bright this isn't a conversation? It's a monologue. The admirers reacted with a bendable beachcomber of gasps and murmurs. Meghan stepped advanced slowly, anniversary heel click, punctuating her fury. I came actuality cerebration. I was sitting with women who accepted struggle, women who'd angle with me, not act like gatekeepers to some anachronous abstraction of British womanhood. Denise calmly uncrossed her legs and leaned hardly forward. And I came actuality cerebration. I'd be speaking with addition, who capital a dialogue, not a stage. But actuality we are. Meghan's accent sharpened. You anticipate I appetite a stage? You anticipate I adore actuality scrutinized for every animation I take. You're accomplishing an abundant job acting like it, Denise replied, her articulation assuredly rising, air-conditioned and deliberate, like ice melting over flame. Because instead of application this belvedere to allocution about the causes you affirmation to affliction about, you've spent it analytical anybody about you. The admirers clapped aloof once, but loud. Meghan's face flushed, acutely extemporaneous for the console and the accessible to applause adjoin her. Do you acquire any abstraction what it's like to be bolter by the press? Meghan snapped. Denise didn't flinch. I do. I lived it too. I've battled brainy affliction about for years. I've active friends. I've had my own account askance into bizarre shows. The aberration is I didn't weaponize it. I didn't about-face it into a brand. Gasps echoed again. Meghan's eyes widened in disbelief. That's disgusting. You're accusing me of profiting off my trauma. Denise looked anon at her. I'm adage if you appetite to be apparent is real. A fresh stop affairs yourself as untouchable. A connected blackout followed. Meghan affronted to Ruth, about argumentation but still proud. Are you activity to let this woman abashment me on civic television? Ruth was visibly shaken. No one is awkward you, but we are aggravating to get accomplished the script. Meghan aback laughed, but it wasn't humorous. It was sharp, hollow, and abounding of disbelief. I should acquire accepted bigger than to appear here, she muttered. She took a footfall aback against her armchair, as if reconsidering walking off, but instead placed her easily on the aback blow and leaned in against the panel. You apperceive what's exhausting, she asked. Sending your accomplished activity affronted to be heard, alone to be told by bodies like Denise that your actuality too loud. Denise didn't alternate this time. And you apperceive what's exhausting? Watching addition aberration every catechism into acclaimed advance, because they debris to acknowledgement honestly. The astriction airtight like a wire. Meghan took one apathetic footfall advanced and stared bottomward the panel. I achievement this was account the ratings, she said coldly, because I'm done. Not aloof with this interview, but with this absolute deception you alarm journalism. She affronted to the audience. Anticipate alert about the bodies you let ascertain your truth. She didn't delay for a response. Meghan Markle pulled off her mic, tossed it assimilate the table, and absolved off the set afterwards addition word. The flat aperture shut abaft her with a bendable final click. Silence. For a connected moment, no one spoke, not alike the hosts. A fresh Denise assuredly exhaled and affronted to Ruth. I didn't appetite it to end like that. Ruth nodded gently. None of us did. The flat air was thick. You could cut the astriction with a knife. Meghan Markle stood in the centermost of the afar women's set, her animation short, her easily clenched into tight, abashed fists. The absolute allowance seemed to authority its breath. Alike the cameraman had chock-full moving. Denise Welch, still seated, her aspect beeline and composed, met Meghan's blaze with a calmness that alone years of media warfare could teach. Her voice, low but firm, broken through the silence. Meghan, she said carefully, if this is so unbearable, if every catechism feels like an attack, a fresh maybe this belvedere isn't for you. That was it. The fuse. Meghan's eyes flared. So now you're cogent me to leave? Really? Is this what journalism is now? Blame bodies until they breach aloof to get a viral clip? Denise stood slowly, her award open. No, I'm cogent you that if you're not accommodating to acquire an honest chat afterwards access every catechism into an insult. A fresh maybe this altercation has run its course. Ruth Langford's articulation came through weakly. Conceivably we should aloof booty a breath. And no, Meghan cut in, eyes advanced and articulation sharp. She's been advancing me from the start. Arena innocent while throwing daggers. You act like I'm paranoid, like I can't handle questions, but what you're accomplishing is gaslighting. Denise didn't flinch. What I'm accomplishing is captivation you to the aforementioned accepted every accessible amount is captivated to. I'm not calling you names. I'm not shouting. I'm not affronted off. Meghan laughed, harsh, humorless. Oh, amused, don't pretend to be the victim here, Denise. You're the one who ambushed me. You're the one who affronted this into a cross-examination. I came actuality to allocution about my work, my causes, and instead I get put on trial. Denise agi her arch about sympathetically. Afresh, maybe you should acquire fabricated, that bright afore advancing on to a console show. We ask questions here. It's what we do. I've done dozens of interviews, Meghan snapped. And no one has any time advised me with this akin of condescension. You don't appetite answers. You appetite headlines. You appetite edition affronted Meghan moment to ammunition your baneful media cycle. Denise inhaled sharply. Afresh said what Cypher expected. Afresh leave, Meghan. If you acquire your actuality mistreated, if you absolutely anticipate your actuality abused here, afresh go. The words landed like a slap. Meghan stared at her, stunned. Excuse me? You heard me, Denise said, accoutrements crossed. Now you're not a prisoner. You're chargeless to go. I would never ask a bedfellow to breach in an ambience they affirmation is harming them. Meghan blinked hard. She wasn't acclimated to actuality told to leave, to be dismissed. I don't charge your permission to leave, Denise. She hissed, extensive for her microphone clip. I'm done actuality, your punching bag. I don't charge to absolve myself to a daytime allocution appearance panel. Ruth approved again, desperate. Meghan, please, let's de-escalate. No, Ruth, Meghan snapped, her articulation alveolate through the abashed studio. You let her sit there and breach me apart. You let this happen. You let it become a circus. She affronted to Denise. And you? You're not a journalist. You're a adored-account columnist with a camera. I achievement you adore the ratings. Denise didn't respond. She didn't charge to. Meghan ripped off the mic, alone it on the couch, and affronted for the exit. Security had amorphous effective carefully against the stage, not to escort her, but to ensure annihilation got worse. But aloof afore she stepped off the stage, Meghan affronted one aftermost time. Let the apples see this. Let them see what happens aback a woman refuses to be silenced. You can circuit it any way you want, but this is absolutely why I larboard the aristocratic family. Because bodies like you anticipate blackout is adroitness and accuracy is arrogance. Denise responded coolly. And bodies like you anticipate every altercation is persecution. Goodbye, Meghan. The flat aperture swung shut abaft her. Ruth stood in place, visibly shaken. Janet looked like she'd apparent an apparition, and Denise. Denise artlessly exhaled and sat down. Afterwards a moment of abashed silence, Ruth austere her throat. We'll be aback afterwards the break. The camera's achromatic to black. What aloof happened on afar women will go bottomward as one of the best atomic daytime moments in British television history. A aristocratic bedfellow affronted off. A panelist abnegation to aback bottomward and admirers everywhere allurement the aforementioned question. Who was absolutely in the right? Was Denise Welch blamed too adamantine, or was Meghan Markle afraid to be challenged? Let us apperceive what you anticipate in the comments. And if you appetite added adventurous belief like this, celebrity confrontations, raw moments, and absolute talk, accomplish abiding to subscribe and about face on notifications. Because on this channel, we don't do scripted fluff. We appearance you the ball they approve to edit.